Hello everybody, welcome to my demonstration session, and today I will be painting in oils, and my inspiration is a photograph I took in Florence looking at Duomo Cathedral from the Campanile, the tower next to Duomo. So I'm really excited to see some of them wonderful architectural elements of the cathedral, parts of the Florence town, the buildings, the hills at the back, and this quite quirky metal frame, which probably just stops the birds flying in. Got some lovely quirkiness to it, but I might make a decision of making kind of keeping it there or not at the last stages of the work. So I'm excited to frame the composition with the walls of the Campanile, having that exciting, just a little different perspective of looking at through something, that little window. So I have a light grey background for me today to work with. It's looks like when we look at the piece, it might be a square composition, but actually, by the time I use part of the top and the bottom part of the window, I think that will give me an extra space to create texture and maybe show a little bit more of the surroundings. I think that would be really good. Now I have already my paints out. I have a group of cool colors. I have emerald green, cobalt blue, bluey gray, and ultramarine. And then I have a group of cool colors, warm colors, cadmium yellow, Naples yellow, ochre, crimson, magenta, violet, and I have some Payne's grey, which is a blacky blue, and I have some, obviously, loads of white. So I'll start with sketching my piece. I have a range of brushes, my favorite filbert brushes. For the oil painting, they have a round edge, but they are quite flat in profile. So that will be good to work with and with details. So let's get to the design of the composition of the layout, and let's have a think what will be our priorities. So first of all, I'm going to use a little bit of oil, and I'm going to go for a warm color. I'm going to go for some ochre and a dab of violet. It's also will reflect kind of the colors, part of the architecture, the colors of the walls, the color of the cathedral, the color of the city, or slightly very different sections of the sketch might have slightly different versions of this color. So first of all, I'm going to plan my window. Okay, so let's have a look at a little bit of a perspective on the top line. Okay, I'm just going to keep it quite watery paint here, and I have quite a lot of space for the windowsill here. And again, I've got slight perspective going this way. Much smaller edge for the window side on the left, and I'm just missing the corner of the window, and I might include it here. Again, when I'll start painting, I might consider removing it, or that's something, maybe it will be quite nice to see some light, or maybe the frame of the metal cover metal frame will be that line. So I might just keep it out for the moment. So I might rub it out. quite an absorbent surface, so paint already soaked in. That's okay, that will dry and work through there. Right, and let's find the angles for the perspective, what happens to the corners of the window. So how much of the actual stone I'm going to see. And this is quite a nice quirky, it's not a perfect line. Maybe let's make it a little bit more extra quirky how the stone was worked into. And for the window sill, all I can see is that direction of the corner, maybe perhaps a little bit sharper, and then some beautiful texture of the stones. Let's have a look. I think that's all big shape here. A little, I can see a little crack in between the two stones here, but it's also quite close to the shadow. And the stone here has a big gap, so I quite like that texture of that extra darkness. I might even straight away paint it over so I can see it as a silhouette. And then this line continues. Maybe there's some more just textures of, again, from the shadows of the metal grid. Okay, and perhaps another little gap within the stone, that roughness, okay, which I can play with later on. Okay. And then let's have a look there actually inside of the window and find the shape of the cathedral. So let's top up the paint slightly more. So the tower, the dome, sorry, not the tower, the dome, is taking almost halfway through of the space in the window. I might just make it a little bit smaller. It's not quite a full space, but almost. Okay, so it's going to take a big chunk of it. So all I'm thinking so far is that kind of vertical line which divides, gives us kind of that reference to what's going to be on the left and what's going to be on the right. So visually we can recognize it behind different elements. Okay. Just making sure that my piece is standing straight. Okay, that's good. And then we have the small towers, the two little rooftops, and let's find where they're going to be roughly within that window. So probably slightly higher than halfway through again, horizontally. Again, that's just a rough position of the shapes. Maybe the rooftops will be a little bit smaller, and then the base for them. I'm not showing any perspectives there yet. Just planning some big spaces. Now let's have a look at the volume of kind of the silhouette of the cathedral on the right hand side of this kind of vertical. So for the dome itself, I can see a little bit of extra space, which actually then makes me judge if everything needs to go a little bit more on the right. Okay, let's move everything tiny bit more on the left. And maybe this line is gonna go. Okay. It will give me a little more space. Okay. My oil is staining my board, but it's not going to be a big deal by the time I start placing the colors more stronger. Right, so I have something starting here and looking at the shape of the smaller roof. Okay, maybe getting a bit of the step there. There's some scaffolding and some work going on, which I'm going to ignore, at least for now. I think that will be best if I just keep it simplified rather than overwork it. And let's find again the spaces left for the overall shape of the cathedral developing here. So I'm looking at that silhouette. There are loads of details, but I want to see the main characteristics there. Okay, let's subdivide some of these spaces. I can play with the perspective afterwards, just working out some of the basics for now. Okay. Let's find the edges of this shapes. Okay, just making sure that things are fitting in, and okay, maybe that's going to be slightly moved across. And some arches within there. Again, I'm starting a little bit maybe too much working into the details, but it gives me an opportunity to judge the spaces and distances a little bit more accurately. Also finding that proportion, it's quite a unique space there. So that might be a good idea to carry on with that. Right, and then we have, okay, that space is slightly further back, or maybe this one is actually coming here. My lines are very wide because I'm sketching with a brush. So I have quite a bit of space to move around. If it could be quite linear to some of the structures, and I can amend some of the key directions. So that's where this shape stands on. That makes it almost halfway through that, and I'm actually arriving right into this rooftop, this lovely shape. The complexity of the structure, the complexity of that is a roof from the main body of the cathedral, so that's not any perspective, this is just a roof here. So yes, the complexity still need to be accounted to, as it might not read well if we just go for what we see. We need to calculate the angles. Yeah, right. So I have, for example, here got 4 segments of the wall seen. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good. Slightly gentle shape here. Okay, and I can again work into the arches. And above that, I have almost straight, but not straight line. It has tiny slant as this segment of the Duomo is just changing the perspective. So this line is going to be going slightly down, this one slightly up. So the one in the middle, or in the middle of that window, round window, probably will be more of a straight line. So that's where my eye of the my horizon line would be, my eye line. So let's make them key element our window. Okay, but inside we're actually going to see not all of it. There will be a few more sub tones to see what's going to be dark. So another set of another edge of the cathedral dome is right here, and it's just somewhere here it's going to be changing just slightly the direction. Okay, there is an element of unfinished by Brunelleschi design, partially half of the cathedral, if I'm not mistaken by how much was not finished. Part of the cathedral has the full details of white marble, and part of it has been left unfinished. So this line will continue being almost the same, maybe just a tiny bit more of a jump. And here I could make more significant change of the perspective. But again, we might not see it behind the roof here by the time it's all coming here. Okay, and then finally, for the top, we'll start seeing a slight slant, a small slant towards the dome, and definitely much stronger slant on the third area, and a few more decorative elements, which again could be developed much later. And because they're so small in comparison to the major shapes, that's not going to be an overall big not going to be paying too much attention, but the rooftop here will be quite nice and brown, lovely orangey shape. So I might consider painting it slightly darker in preparation for the further gorgeous terracotta roof tiles. Okay. Now some more designs and patterns here, which I'll just roughly divide into shapes. My strokes are so wide, it doesn't quite give it justice. But I know this is just symmetry. That's what I'm really looking for at the moment. There are quite a lot of relief of the segments here, and there's some ready for texture to be attached to the central area here under the dome, the marble decorations, which are not finished. Okay, now if I would have been painting the second little roof over one of the baptisteriums, well, those little segments which support in the base of the dome. they will have similar structure. It's partially cut, so it's not going to have a full, perhaps 8 angles, perhaps even more. So I would have thought of 8 sides. So I might be able to see so if that side will be more straight and maybe the most fuller seen, and the other ones will start being much more shorter. Just gives me an idea of possible volume of those arches. In comparison to the one here. Okay, now let's look back at the roof here. Okay, I've got quite a good space created there. That's all good. Some nice decorative textures as well. Okay, that shape might be slightly different. So I can see 2 arches in this section. And actually 3 arches. Maybe they're a little bit narrower, but because it's a half segment which has been cut by the cathedral, so the design has been amended. Okay, so those arches might be here. Okay, and there are a couple of more shapes to work on the lower part here on the cathedral. So there's something, a little pillar standing out and full of light, almost like a little balcony seen at the top. It's very heavy in pattern and relief. So all I'll do here is just to get some of the perspective lines in support for later on decorations. There's another pillar, another one, but within my darker lines here together, they will create big enough space. And that's the line I'll be looking for. Just make it slightly darker so I can see it here. Okay, so I'm just tweaking now the existing sketch lines. So that's all good here. That's all good there. And now these shapes will start coming through in the pattern. Okay, there are a few more complex things there, which I could do with light as I'm painting it. Right, quite a complex design already. Let's find some darker shapes, like windows, like remaining darker shapes of the floor here, which perhaps will ground the light design. And let's have a look at the streets and city view. So almost in line with my rooftop, I can see the city, but to make it a little bit more different, I don't quite like lines matching together, aligning with certain key elements. So I might just make it slightly higher, and it will be a hazy horizon line for the city. And there are mountains at the back. Again, they're in a hazy light at the back, but that will be quite exciting. I might be exaggerating them and hide deliberately. So that's a fabulous feel of the spaces there. I can also see the street here. So let's find some of the silhouettes of the buildings and the light of the street. So I'm going to start with the corner of the Duomo Museum here. Okay, and its roof continues. It's quite a complex group of buildings, actually, Duomo Museum, where they keep all the original statues and reliefs and bas-reliefs from the cathedral. Okay, slightly different angle here. Okay, so I can see then the shadows. I might just work into and paint the shadow on the street and on the buildings at the same time, so I can see the shape better. And the shadow of the buildings on the opposite side are right here. So let's plant some of them light. And then maybe that darkness disappears in the curvature of that street. So it gives us immediate feel that we're looking down on from the cathedral, from the Campanile. And the lovely shapes of the shadows on the ground also will play vital role. Now what I can see here is some little oases with green trees. So I might just put a little reminder of something different in green in the very big space of city roofs at the back. I also love a little shape of the cathedral further back in the distance. So I will place it as a standing out shape, just again to give myself an opportunity to be much further. I have moved it. Maybe I think it might be interrupting if I've got some trees here in the cathedral. There might be slightly too much together. So I need to decide if will be more important for me to have the trees, or maybe the trees will be slightly smaller, or if I can just not paint the cathedral there, or maybe even move it elsewhere. Maybe I'll move it somewhere there. There might be another cathedral there. So if it's not perfectly where it's supposed to be, loads of cathedrals in the city, loads of domes. So that would be good to see that variety, to show the distance behind them. Right, just double checking my straight lines. Excuse me. Maybe some of these ones will be slightly moved. Just want to have a neutral color just to see that line not going over, leaning to the right. Okay, better. The shadows don't help. Kind of those smudges of my oil don't help to see the shapes better, but that's okay. We can work with that. Okay, so I think my linear work is completed, and I'm ready to start painting. Perhaps a tiny bit more of a line for the shadow where the light is going to start landing on this side of the building, this side of the window, sorry. So again, that just kind of widens up the space a little. Right, and let's start painting with color. Now I have my more or less medium gray tone, maybe not, maybe a lighter version of it. And I have got some of the shadows with my line. So I want to bring some highlights to the painting. So I'd like to start with painting the sky. So I have some white, and I'm going to go, now on my photograph, the sky just looks very pale white, got no definition, but the camera struggles to pick up the gorgeous blues, especially when it's set up, picks up the light within a dark environment, interior of the tower. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get some cobalt blue or cerulean. Both will be good colors to use. Now, so we'll start perhaps maybe too light. Let's just test it maybe against the middle ground somewhere here. So at the top, maybe cobalt blue or cerulean. If you're using cobalt blue, just maybe a little bit extra white to make it slightly lighter version of it. Okay, just testing the darkness of that blue here. Okay, maybe even a dab of ultramarine. I think it looks a little flat color without the ultramarine. Even if it will be a lighter version of ultramarine, ultramarine could be quite a dark color. I'm making it slightly lighter, coming towards the cathedral. Now the cathedral will be in the shadow, so to show the contrast, we need to have slightly lighter sky in this corner. I can paint over my lines here at the top. Again, that's where I need to do a bit of blending and using some lighter tone further down. Could use a tiny bit more, even emerald green, to make a slightly exciting turquoise light blue at the close to the mountains. And again, the closer I'll get to the cathedral, probably will make it stronger in light. Okay, this mountain could be slightly shaped lower as well. And I'm using quite big strokes, so my sky doesn't look too even, so I might go just a little over, so it doesn't have that perfect evenness. I want a little texture. Perhaps there is more of a haze over the city. Maybe those lines just will give us a little understanding of the calmness of the sky, the depths. So a tiny bit more lighter here. Combining the rhythm of the strokes and the light we need to have close to the cathedral. And on top of everything, the paint reflects quite a bit. Okay. And let's work into the mountains. I'm going to go for a more diluted version of the ultramarine, I think. They might have a slight shade of violet and ochre as well later, but maybe starting with ultramarine. I think the right hand side mountain hill It could be slightly more darker to show the contrast. And perhaps tiny bit more lighter. I'm going to use a little bit of blue gray to use almost that haze with a tiny bit more white. Slight haze. Heat of the day. And I think the other left-hand side mountain, I'm going to use small turquoise, just a darker version of it. Again, this will be really good to support the cathedral, which will have loads of warm colors at the same time. This might just be a nice contrast to work with. I think that will go. No, maybe this one will go over. Maybe both will be hazier at the bottom on the lower segments. Okay, now I can see a little bit of my contour here from my brown strokes. So I just want to make sure that goes. And which shape is overlapping, which just gently, I know it's far back at the distance, but will be quite good to know. And maybe hazy edges, just using a little bit of extra oil. As I don't want sharp silhouette in the distance. So it's more of a suggestiveness of them at the back. Right, so one light area is finished. Well, actually, it's ended up not being so light as on the photograph, but it's kind of our highlighted area anyway. And painting the sky is always good to get started. But now let's look at other highlights within the painting. So we can see some bold, strong light on the wall of the window, and a strong, bold light on the road, maybe part in the cathedral, but I think I'll leave that one until the end. So I've washed my brush and I'm going to work with some Napoli's yellow for my stonework here. So far it might be just a neutral, well, not neutral, just a plain Napoli's yellow. Just want to see how the warmth of the color will settle in. Perhaps I might need a little more white to neutralize that boldness of yellow in Napoli's yellow here. So let's have that sandstone. Well, quite nice to see that boldness of the kind of golden color again against everything gray. It looks quite golden. If I would have put it against with another environment, it might have not looked the same. So good to see the strength of the pigment here. I'm going to take it all the way here to the lower corner, and I'll probably brush through this color when I'll have more shadows here as well. Quite like that bit of light, fiery light. But at the base, I might put a little bit more diluted version of it. Maybe a little bit more ochre and a dab of violet with it, but much lighter tone. So let's work into this. So it's slightly duller than just direct Napoli's yellow. So if you've got direct light, it might be not so powerful on a different surface. Let's check if I'm on the right line here. Maybe I need to put a tiny bit more higher. I think a little dab of Napoli's yellow is not going to hurt anything. And as I'm going further into the window, I'm going to make it slightly darker. Maybe the texture of the stone is changing, not just the light itself. I might have a little bit more fiery yellow, just glimpsing here and there. And if I continue going further away from the edge of the window, I'm going to have some more violet present in this paint. Still need quite a bit of white, so violet and ochre, just a darker tone, maybe a tiny bit more darker. Very small changes of the tones here. Texture becomes a bit more stronger. So darkness just a little stronger. And again, maybe lightens up on this stone, maybe just a texture much more smoother. Maybe it will be the light is more direct. Just varying it as well from one corner of the painting to another is good practice. Now I can see another heated reflection of the warm stone here, because this is the wall which goes vertically here. I'll show you kind of the, yeah, so that's the wall, the bricks, the stone's going to go that way, and this is the wall which is kind of part of the window, so which goes that way. So I might have that reflection painted quite warmly as well, but it should be darker. So let's go for maybe not using much ochre, but maybe some more cadmium yellow with a dab of violet and ochre. Ochre is still slightly present. So let's combine, connect it tiny bit more. Don't want it to look too yellow. I want to see it as a deeper heat, as a deeper ochre. Okay. I think I need more pigment. means more yellow, slightly more ochre, quite a bit of oil. And again, from one side to another side of the window, I need to make sure it will be varying. So if I'll paint it a little similar first, and then I can make adjustments as the big block of it is there. Right, so the edge of the area could have a little extra light, but not on the border with the sky, but perhaps somewhere mid-ground, because there are a few reflections there. And might be need again a little bit more extra yellow rather than just a plain white. I just want that light continuing. Okay. It's reflecting when it becomes quite nice and oily. Just need to make sure gently and partially blend it so it doesn't have too sharp corners. And I did like having an even edge, but I don't want to see any darker segments from my drawing line. So in this case, that's all need to go. Okay, so it looks a little bit of inverted lights, so we need to start introducing some shadows here as well. So let's use a bigger brush and some warmth to it as well. So I'm going to start with similar colors, some cadmium yellow, some ochre, and I'd like to use a little magenta to heat up the color. And at the same time, I'm going to partially cool it off with some violet. So let's just get that consistency. Working well. So perhaps here on the top, this might be a little too light. So the violet comes as pigment which bring not just the darkness, but also the intensity of the brown. Maybe I'll have a stronger violet on the border of the window. Okay, a little bit more, oh, a little bit less intensive, maybe halfway through. Again, just to vary, just to see how the light spreads. Okay, this red orange could go a little bit more softer. And again, the opposite side, maybe it will go slightly sharper and darker. And little corner of the window, just need to make sure there is no white gaps or previous drawing line marks left. So I just want to make sure that's a thicker layer there. Got that lovely curvature of the shapes. Maybe some extra texture of darks, just kind of brushing through some of these areas so it's not just perfect. I picked up some black by accident. I really wanted some red and violet. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more lighter. Let's pick up some white and cadmium yellow. So on top of that heavily painted surface, a little glow of light will smudge quite well. I'm just ending up with similar stroke sizes on that spread of light. It's partially reflecting as well, so I'm going over the same area very many times to get the effect I'm reaching out for. Okay, let's leave it at that for the moment. Maybe this glow of light will be more intensive, or maybe the violet here need to be even stronger because it is one of the darkest corners of the painting. Maybe I need to intensify it even more. Okay, let's see how it dries. There are similar darknesses on the side of the wall here as well, but perhaps not as warm, maybe a little bit of coolness, but there's similar glimpses of heat inside of, because it's a similar wall here, just continues, and that one is a top, so that's wall, it's that wall, and that wall goes that way. So you've got different surfaces, and the light will behave differently in those surfaces. So maybe the glow of warmth will remain somewhere here and continues into some of those cracks, gaps of the stonework. Maybe that extra texture just will come from partially dry brushing the surface. Using a little bit of oil, creating a little bit of extra playful textures here. I think some of these textures could come somewhere here as well to make it less perfect, those stones. Okay, and let's have a look at this side. I'm going to use some white, some ochre, and some bluey gray as a transitional color. Okay, that's looking very similar to my gray, so maybe less white and a dab more of ultramarine. Quite a bit of ochre as well. Now, ultramarine and ochre, less likely combination of color to create green. There might be very small hint of the green, but it's not of a natural green. It's more of a mucky gray, dull green, if you want to call it green. It's more of a warmer version of blue or cooler version of ochre. So again, if I were to start with that coolness here first, and then exaggerate the darkness of it. I'll do a tiny bit more darkness with ultramarine over this shape, and especially on the right hand side of the shape next to the yellow. Getting a bit more light at the bottom, and then much more ultramarine at the top, perhaps a little bit of the violet brown we used earlier, but it's so it needs to be dark. Maybe that's not dark enough, but it's a good start. Quite a thick layer of paint underneath, it just lifts it up. So I'm going to persevere with some darker strokes here as they develop into softer tones going down. It's a little reflected for you on the screen. We've got some nice darkness to it here. The yellow is really glowing again on the screen, but it's quite a pleasant, subtle yellow. I have just stepped away from my painting and put it under the angle so it doesn't reflect for me. And I could see that perhaps this corner is still too bright. But I totally love that warmth of the shadow. So I think I can bring partially of that shadow here. Now I can't quite see it because of the metal frame here. So I'm more kind of relying on my sense of what colors might work better, and kind of relying on that shadow there. So I think if I'll bring it across and perhaps bring more of that golden light a bit more close to the edge of the window at the bottom, and make it slightly bolder, lighter tones. I think that would be best. So let's come back to cadmium yellow. Right, I might need to wash my brush well. I still actually have my warmer brush, so I had quite a bit of blue on the other one. So let's come back to some cadmium yellow. I might need more of that. And let's top up some of the colors. So I have mixed my color as well now, just topped up my paints. So let's just have a cooler shadow. So I'm going to preserve all the cooler tones I worked into, but I'm going to make them maybe a tiny bit more darker with violet and tiny bit more white, so it's lower area, it's not as bold in its strength of the heat. And that direct light might be after analyzing more falling into the flat surface of the window. So again, on the screen it just looks a little too strong. Okay, but it's all start working well, especially when I add glimpses of brickwork developing, and some other uneven surfaces catching that light a little stronger. A few more surfaces which will have a little bit of extra warmth there. It also wants to have more darkness here as well. Maybe that violet and ultramarine will have to be even stronger intensity. To support those shadows. Okay, maybe my cooler tones are slightly disappearing. They might have a hint of them underneath. I think that feels more natural in look. And the coolness here might just appear as the oils will start drying. And I'll work on a little more texture. Right, that's quite a lot of texture here from my darks. Soften it with stronger, warmer color back again. And then I'll go for some fresher white for that extra, the extra highlights, which might not be much at all. I think that's why I need to be a bit more careful. Bit more shadow here, even if it does catch some light. Okay, that's looking and making more sense. Right, so I just need to highlight the lower part of the window. Okay, so I'm coming back to Napoli's yellow, and let's put a bit more stronger warmth here. I've gently adjusted my camera for the colors to look more natural, how they are on the painting. So that yellow is a gorgeous light, not just color. Quite like using it quite thickly here as well. Perhaps maybe too early on to use a thick layer, because I haven't painted all the details on the cathedral behind. But I know I can always come back to similar strokes. At least I'm working out the shapes, color of the shapes. Much more excitingly, and the previous layer is still okay. Again, start looking on the screen very yellow when it's not. I'm gonna have to persevere and let my camera to adjust to the saturation of that yellow. You definitely start seeing that this is more of a less direct light. It's quite a soft change of it. maybe just put in tiny bit more stronger light to show it's still in this area. It is still quite bold. I love that little curvature, kind of how the stone is broken. That little indentation in the stone. Just got that instant storytelling of how did that happen? What was the cause of it? Was something, the window was covered up, wasn't allowed to see out. There was some extra work carried through. Okay, maybe a little bit too bold now, this little mark. Or it's money to connect into the other shapes. That's better. Okay, so now to make the cathedral again gain its body and its weight, I'll need to put some shadows in it. But as I'm working on my light, maybe another last highlight will be the road. And the road in the city has a light shape, but what type of light? I think if I were to use very diluted violet with a very minuscule volume of ochre in it, that will show light, but mainly slightly cooler version of light. It has a big shape. I might put some pedestrians and cars later on. So for now, it might look a little lonely street, as if it would have been early morning. So I'll populate the street of the city later. But for now, it has more simplicity to that. And again, it's not overly strikingly light because my grays reasonably light altogether. So let's work on the cathedral now and build up some darks into that. Now I feel if I'll use bluey gray as one of my bases as a color and structure other colors around it, I think I'll be working quite well. So let's start with some of the shadows and let's just check if that's going to be dark enough. No, not dark enough. So I can make it slightly darker by adding a tiny bit more ultramarine or cobalt blue or a bit of both and a dab of black. Okay, let's check the darkness of it. I think for this area might be too dark. It's hard to say by painting a small area, so I'm going to be brave and go slightly bigger in shape. Now the disadvantage of working in a larger kind of with the bigger spaces now is that I'm going to lose all my perspective lines and all my structures. Advantage of it is that I'll see shapes better and it will give me more sense of space and I can work within those shapes. Right, so let's see if I can see this blue elsewhere, even perhaps on the glass of the window. Might need to be darker. I think it will need to be darker than the sky. But for now, again, I'll leave it there. There's some scaffolding shapes. Slightly confuses me because it's got some lovely blues on them, but I don't want the scaffolding painted. Okay. A lot of cooler colors in some of the decorations. So it feels like I want to go darker for the patterns, for the gray blue patterns. One way of doing it is painting the lights of the cathedral first and the patterns last. But if I go with the color of the patterns just to as big bulk, might help me to shrink them later on, but it doesn't give me that quick instant feel for the cathedral, which is more important, I think, at this stage. Right, let's make the window slightly stronger in pigment. Okay, that's good. I might just leave that one there. Right, and I think cathedral will have to be slightly warmer with some violet in it. I'm adding a little bit more ochre to my violet and gray, just to experiment what's going to happen to the whole shape of the cathedral and kind of before all the tiny details. I need to see it as a silhouette, and at the moment it's way too light. So I think I'm going to start using, I might be on the right track, I might not be. So my intentions are to have a small brush, which I'm going to dip into bluey gray, like indigo, ready for touching up the details, or at least some of the major shapes, so I'm not going to lose them. Okay, that's too light. Okay. So instead of looking at a lot of details, if I'll just try this corner to give me a bit more reassurance if it's going to work. I can add more highlights in certain areas. Okay, it's quite reflective at the moment. Let's let it be and let it dry. I think something is gonna work here. If I'll persevere a little more. The window itself, I might need a smaller brush here. Will need to be slightly darker, so that violet, warm. Okay, that doesn't look dark enough. And partially again, the light will come back in the window, but let's just see as an overall shape. I need to keep the roundness of it, because it has just a gentle oval shape to it, but more or less perfect circle. Just how much of it we see on a flat surface differs. Okay, let's just give it a moment to dry so you'll see the difference. I think some of the similar tones will come up, a different color. Not for this section. As the windows, the oil just gently absorbs in the surface. The window stands out much stronger now. Some more shadow next to the highlighted corner of the window. And the beauty of this painting will be within those little details, not overly taking all the attention, but it's a zoom into the cathedral of a big significance. So it would be quite important to see the attention to details here. So I'm just trying to find those comparable lights, shadows, warms, cools. Certain darknesses are looking similar here. Let's say the inside of the window and the outer rim of the window all looking a little similar. So maybe my combinations here of light and dark need to be compared. With some extra highlights here, as I was saying, there will be differences in light traveling around the ridge and the width of the window, but just to get the initial feel for it. We needed the overall darkness for the shape of the window. I can build up the light. Just a little glance at how some of the elements could be finished. Yeah, let's let it again dry. See how that space will stand out. So I'm happy. So I kind of researched a little bit for my color application, my color choice, and I think I'm ready to go for the other areas with this cooler violet, gray. In some places might even go more pink. So that's more of a violety pink. I'll make it slightly lighter. Again, I need to be careful of that. Constantly feels like it could go further and further into the light, but I'm actually still looking for the darker silhouette. I think that might be still light as well. I want to have the cathedral walls full of wonderful color of similar tone. So the same darkness, but varieties of color. And I could achieve it once I've got my overall tones. I can tweak them, the light in different areas. I think that might be working into more darker violets. And this corner could be much darker as it will stand out against the light of the city. So I'll do the whole rim of this section together and work maybe more into the gray violets on the edge. Will be a little glow of the violet below, so it just loads of such a complex shape. I don't want to keep it too simplified. At the same time, the unity of it It has to be in place, otherwise the whole thing will collapse. Again, perhaps a little bit more bluey gray on this wall against the street. I think this is not good for pink. And perhaps a little bit more peachy light later on. So if I unite it with the violet color initially, again, just very reflective areas. Stepping into smaller light to see how it will start. Shining on the whole surface here. So then the initial darker silhouette is a bit more, it's showing, but not so strongly. Almost like sub light. So then when this shiny color will settle, we'll start seeing that maybe I don't need to do the particular details of all elements of the cathedral. Maybe some of them will need to be just used, kind of identified as by using light. Some of them will be identified by using outlines. So that's the beauty of that painting, is kind of finding out the magic way of lighting it up. I'm getting more and more happy with this approach. I just feel the unpainted section in the cathedral for the lights, for the shadows. for the rooftops. On my rooftop. Come over. So I'll mix some warmer color again. Using some crimson and ochre, so it's not so bold, lit up by the sunshine color as the surrounding stonework. Yeah, that's quite a boldish red. So to cool it off, I need a little bit more of my violet and white. So it's present there, but it's not so strong. Okay, I'll paint the whole roof together, and then I can identify the shadows more. Again, if I'll do the same here, but I think this roof is actually dark altogether. And the shadow might be even more intensive, but the highlight might still come in. So this shadow will come here. Gentle blend. And this shadow will need to be even stronger. Might even use a dab of ultramarine with my violet. And I think a similar darkness could come in very small quantity. Just in the corner here. Now the roof hasn't got, I think, best silhouette yet, but I'm getting there. And also the wall here looks too lightened up. Yeah, just again, slowly getting together. If I would have had less patterns on the building, and I wouldn't have spent so much time on very delicate color identification, shape identification, kind of combination of colors, I would have worked into big forms very quickly and then worked into smaller nuances. But the volume here of everything is quite incredible, which is wonderful. Painting this most magnificent building. Right. Decrease in the angle. Let's start changing the perspective there. Okay. That's already as it's gently dries. Create that playfulness of the light. Again, I've increased the reflective surface, and it's slightly different again. Need to be very patient how the color is settling on top of another. So these are the larger shapes for the building design. So I'm painting them a little bit more meticulously when the patterns below will be less detailed. Okay, these ones are no longer brown. Something within the paint. Right, last corner of the roof in brown violet is going to be here. You can still see loads of light. I don't want to have too much attention on these little details. I want to simplify the shape. I'm going to have loads of light here, but before I put the light, I actually do need to put some shadow, and even if I'll put the light more or less immediately. Slightly more white and Napoli's yellow, perhaps more stronger white. Again, it's minuscule details, but they're just so well connected with the window, so I can't quite afford to lose them. Or wait for them to be reintroduced at the later time, because they're only small, but it's quite important to me. White just missing the other side, but I will work into them paler blues and to carry on the light. That's how they will start appearing. Again, these are my checkup points. Am I on the right track with the light? Yeah, because if I can't, again, they're slightly bolder because the paint again is still quite wet. Right, so I can see how I can work now within the cathedral. I can take a little break from it. I'll just touch up tiny bit of highlight on this side of the cathedral on just a couple of lines, couple of little lights. Where the sun is coming through. Even if they will be a slightly abrupt and slightly over the top, there'll be my reminders of light going through these areas. A stronger contrast here. I wanted blending into whites, but the light is there. Okay, let's have a look at the city and the walls within the city. Now, the color for the buildings will be a strong yellow in real life. Now, because we're in the shadow, we can still have kind of very similar glimpse of that heat, but at the same time in a big shadow. So if I'm using some crimson, some cadmium yellow, ochre, and maybe a dab of violet, that will give me a silhouette of the color. Sorry, silhouette of the yellow, but it will still appear lighter than the cathedral. So it's a shadow. It's a heated shadow. Actually, I think it's too hot. Maybe slightly cooler. If it's become lighter, I can make it slightly mixed with a dab of ochre, sorry, violet, but maybe not as hot. Okay, let's try this. Almost like lemon yellow in a shadow. Maybe not quite a good comparison. Lemon yellow will have lots of lovely greens in it as well. It's more of a glowing color, but still identified with the darker side of the building. I think some similar light is going to be somewhere here, and perhaps a couple of rooftops away. We see in a corner of the building, and then the shapes will start getting very similar in color, or kind of mingle with the colors of the rooftops. It's a slightly lighter tone for the corner. I think it's more reflecting the light from the road, from the street pavement, street surface, pavement surface, and then immediately moves into a shadow. Some other buildings will have on this side slight hint of light and not shadow again, but again not much. I'm going to let the oil settle there, and I can go over some of them shadows on the ground. I can do now, I can use some of this browny color to identify some of the again pattern, just to show that is one of our buildings. There's a window. The window eventually will have a darker tone. The rooftops look quite similar in tone. Maybe it's the smallest shade darker. They're not red, they're not fresh orange. They have the kind of skimmed light. So the heat of the day takes some of the boldness of the color. So I think again my violet, lighter version of it might be a good choice. And perhaps I will touch it with a little bit of red later. This red is too light, too dark. And this red is too similar to the yellows I'm making. So my distant rooftops, I want to make them. Okay, that's a good color. Which could come close to the edge of the roof here. The further I'm going to paint the city, the less pink or the less strong pigment. I think that cathedral might need to go for the moment. I will be much softer, and I'll start working into more lighter violets and also into even grayish blues. So the pale grey background is a welcome color. Take some of the darker tones off the horizon. And then some extra highlights. Grayish blue with some white. And I'm just checking the intensity of contrast, the intensity of the highlights before going full and finishing the area. Maybe there will be some fresh white little dots reflecting the shiny surfaces. Maybe whatever might be on the surfaces of the roofs. Some blue and violet together for the shadows. Okay, just check them out if they are sustainable dark, so if they need to be slightly lighter. Let's just get a couple of silhouettes of cars or uneven spots. To show the people walking on. The guy might have something light on top, so it's not immediate fresh light on that. Okay, don't like that yellow here. Similar shapes here, so let's avoid them. Now the silhouettes of the windows are going to start coming in. Maybe chimney pots, maybe some of the shadows on the rooftops again, which will start more playful element. And my trees, I wanted to do some trees. I want it to be much more subtle in its green, quite darkened silhouette. Maybe a little haze. Hazy grey, hazy blue. I'm not sure if that particularly works. Again, I'll have to let it dry and persevere to see the shapes as when they dry, make my final decision, but I can always paint over it. I think it's a bit too much. That extra light might need to be dancing between the trees to have lovely effects. The whole shape is just looking, I was looking a bit too similar, so let it be. Let's see how it will start to appear afterwards. I love this gorgeous pink on the backdrop. Might bring something a bit more stronger here against the building, and even perhaps a similar part of the pink. And now eventually this pink will travel further into the cathedral, but not so light. maybe the edges of the shapes. Really want it to be like a jewel, really excites us with the color. Might sound like I'm having a bit of a tough time here painting, but I'm actually really enjoying it. It makes me focus on so many different elements at the same time and hold in my mind so many different things to keep seeing the whole shape and seeing enough desirable details. But for today, I might stop now, but I'm slowly starting to, well, my surface has started to be ready to get the lights on the cathedral shining, and gently adding more and more variety of color here. But thank you very much for joining me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you in my future classes and demonstrations. And once this piece is finished, I'll make sure I'll attach it to the front cover of the video, and you'll know what the final look for the cathedral I'll get. So thank you very much for being with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the future sessions. Thank you.